The digital display of Service Elevator 4 inside the Blackwood Tower didn't just flicker, it bled. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, the dead hour when the building's concrete bones settled with groans that sounded too much like human misery. Sarah, a young nurse returning from a double shift, watched with bleary eyes as the red LED numbers counted up past the 20th floor, the 30th, the 40th. The problem was, Blackwood Tower only had 38 floors. As the numbers climbed into the impossible 50s, the air inside the cab grew frigid, smelling not of stale cigarette smoke and cleaning fluid, but of wet earth and something ancient, copper-sharp and metallic, the distinct scent of dried blood. She pressed the emergency stop button, her fingers trembling, but the plastic was cold enough to burn her skin, and the button offered no resistance, as if the mechanism behind it had dissolved. The hum of the elevator motor, usually a rhythmic mechanical whir, shifted into a low-frequency thrum that vibrated in her teeth and behind her eyes. It wasn't the sound of machinery anymore. It was a rhythmic, wet, inhaling sound, like a colossal lung expanding within the shaft. The walls of the elevator, clad in cheap wood veneer, began to sweat a thick, translucent fluid that trickled down to the floor, pooling around her sneakers. The numbers on the display dissolved into jagged, nonsensical glyphs that hurt to look at, shapes that defied geometry, twisting and writhing like trapped insects. The ascent didn't stop. Sarah felt the pressure change in her ears, a popping sensation that turned into a sharp, piercing pain as gravity seemed to double, pinning her to the floor. She wasn't just going up. She was being pulled somewhere else. The lights in the ceiling flickered and died, plunging her into absolute darkness, save for the red glow of the distorted floor indicator, which now displayed a symbol that looked like a weeping eye. Then, the motion stopped with a violent lurch that threw her against the sweating wall. Silence swallowed the cabin, absolute, heavy, and suffocating. There was no chime to announce the arrival. Slowly, with a grinding screech of metal on bone, the doors began to slide open. Sarah scrambled backward, pressing herself into the corner, praying to see a hallway, a janitor's closet, anything recognizable. But the doors revealed only a vast, infinite gray expanse where ash fell like snow, and the floor was a lattice of rusted chains suspended over a void that whispered her name in her dead mother's voice. She tried to scream, but the air in this place was too thin, too stolen. From the gray mist beyond the threshold, a figure emerged, tall, elongated, with limbs that possessed too many joints. It wore a bellhop's uniform that was tattered and fused to its gray skin. It didn't walk. It drifted, its feet dragging on the chains, creating sparks that were black instead of bright. It reached a hand into the elevator, a hand with fingers like surgical needles, and pressed the button for the ground floor, smiling a smile that split its face from ear to ear. The door slammed shut before she could run, trapping her with the realization that the thing hadn't entered the elevator to attack her. It had stayed outside. But as the elevator began to plummet, falling faster than gravity should allow, Sarah looked at the mirror on the back wall. The reflection showed the elevator was empty, but Sarah wasn't alone. Standing right behind her, breathing ice against her neck, was the reflection of the Bellhop, waiting for the descent to end. The Blackwood Tower stands like a jagged scar against the Chicago skyline, a brutalist monolith of darkened concrete and soot-stained glass that was outdated the moment it was finished in 1974. It is a building that the city tries to forget, a massive residential block located in a district that gentrification skipped over, surrounded by the skeletal remains of industry and the howling winds of Lake Michigan. To the casual observer, it is merely an eyesore, a testament to an era of architecture that valued function over form. But to those who live within its walls, it is a vertical prison. The rent is suspiciously cheap, the rooms are cavernous, and the turnover rate is high. Not because people move out, but because they simply stop coming home. The architect, Silus Blackwood, was a man obsessed with the concept of liminal spaces, the transitional zones between destinations where reality is thinnest. He vanished 3 days before the building's grand opening, leaving behind blueprints that contained erratic scribbles and calculations that referenced non-Euclidean geometry. The building officially has 38 floors, a basement, and a sub-basement for utilities. However, the elevator control panels in the service shafts have always been plagued by glitches. Residents whisper about the phantom buttons, lights that flicker on for floors 44, 72, or floor 9. The atmosphere inside Blackwood is one of perpetual twilight. The fluorescent lights in the hallways buzz with a sickly yellow hue that makes skin look jaundiced. The air is stagnant, recycled through vents that haven't been cleaned in decades, carrying the faint, sweet odor of mildew and something else, something musky and feral. It is 1999, just before the turn of the millennium, and anxiety is high. The Y2K panic has people on edge, fearful of technology failing, but in Blackwood Tower the technology doesn't fail, it evolves. Our protagonist is Elias Thorne, a 45-year-old elevator technician and night security guard. Elias is a man carved from grief. He took the job at Blackwood because it offers solitude, and the night shift allows him to avoid the empty side of his bed where his wife used to sleep. He is a rational man, a mechanic who believes in gears, pulleys, and electrical currents. He carries a heavy flashlight, a ring of keys that jingle like chimes, and a distinct lack of imagination. But Elias has begun to notice patterns in the logbooks, discrepancies in the mileage of elevator car 4, power surges that occur at exactly 3:33 a.m., and the disturbing testimonies of the residents he tries to ignore. The elderly woman in 4B who claims she hears a choir singing from beneath the floorboards, or the latchkey kid in 12F who says the elevator took him to a place where the sky was made of teeth. The horror of Blackwood Tower is not just ghosts or demons, it is the architecture itself. The building is a machine designed to harvest something from its occupants, and the elevators are the collection vessels. As we enter this story, the glitches are becoming more frequent. The barriers between our world and the floors that don't exist are eroding. The elevator is no longer just a mode of transport. It is a mouth, and it is hungry. Elias is about to find out that some doors, once opened, can never be closed, and that the ground floor is not the bottom of the shaft. It is merely the lid of the box. The history of the ground beneath Blackwood Tower was marred long before the first foundation pile was driven into the earth. Local archives, kept in the dusty basement of the city library, revealed that the site was once an industrial slaughterhouse in the late 1800s, a place where thousands of cattle met their end, their fear and blood soaking into the marshy soil. When the slaughterhouse burned down in 1902, killing 20 workers, the land sat barren for decades, a scarred patch of earth where stray dogs refused to walk. It was Silus Blackwood who bought the land for a pittance in the early 70s. Blackwood was a recluse, rumored to be involved in occult circles, fascinated by the idea of verticality as a means to ascension. He designed the tower not for comfort, but for alignment. Windows facing specific stars, hallways with acoustic properties that amplified whispers, and elevator shafts that acted as the spine of the beast. Elias Thorne knew none of this when he started his shift on a rainy Tuesday in November. He sat in the security booth, the monitors bathing his tired face in a blue glow. The rain lashed against the glass of the lobby doors, distorting the city lights outside into smears of neon. The lobby itself was an echo chamber of marble and brass, cold and uninviting. His radio crackled. Elias checked the service elevator in the north wing. Mrs. Higgins says it's making that noise again. It was the day manager, leaving a message before clocking out. Elias sighed, grabbing his toolkit and flashlight. Mrs. Higgins was known for complaining about the wind, the pipes, and the color of the carpet. As Elias walked the long, dim corridor toward the north wing, he felt the familiar drop in temperature. The heating in Blackwood was notoriously patchy, but this was different. It was a focused cold, a pocket of freezing air that seemed to hang specifically around the elevator banks. He reached the heavy steel doors of car 4. The digital display was dark. He pressed the call button. Nothing happened. No light, no chime. He pressed it again, harder. Suddenly the arrow lit up, not with the usual amber glow, but with a harsh flickering crimson. The display read, B2, Sub-Basement 2. That was impossible. The elevator didn't go to B2. The shaft ended at B1. Piece of junk, Elias muttered, forcing the doors open with a specialized key. The shaft gaped before him, a throat of darkness. He shone his flashlight down. The cables were swaying gently, though there was no draft. Far below, in the pit, he saw a reflection. Water? Oil? He couldn't tell. He locked the doors in the open position and climbed onto the roof of the car, which was parked just below the lobby level. The top of the elevator was coated in a thick, greasy dust. As he began to check the tension on the cables, he noticed something caught in the grease. It looked like a bird, or what was left of one, but as he leaned closer, the beam of his light revealed it wasn't a bird. It was a rat, twisted and fused into the metal mechanism of the pulley, its bones elongated and stretched as if it had been pulled through a taffy machine. Elias recoiled, wiping his gloves on his pants. What the hell? He looked up the shaft. The darkness seemed to press down on him. He heard a sound from high above, a rhythmic clang, 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 like someone striking the guide rails with a hammer. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing weirdly, distorting as it bounced up the concrete tube. "Maintenance. Is anyone up there?" The clanging stopped instantly. In the silence that followed, Elias heard a whisper, clear as day, right next to his ear. "Going up?" He spun around, nearly losing his footing on the slick metal roof. There was no one there, just the cables, the grease, and the twisted rat. Later that night, back in the security booth, Elias tried to shake off the unease. He poured coffee from his thermos and opened the maintenance logbook. He flipped back a few months looking for previous issues with Car 4. The handwriting of the previous technician, a man named Old Marcus, who had retired abruptly, was shaky. The entries were standard at first. Replaced fuse, oiled tracks. But the last few entries were erratic. Oak T12, Car 4 acting up. Mileage counter shows extra 50 miles overnight. Where is it going? Octi 14, sounds in the shaft, not mechanical. Crying? Octi 30, I saw the floor. It's not on the blueprints, I'm not going back in. Elias stared at the words. Marcus had always been a no-nonsense guy. Why would he write this? A sudden movement on the security monitor caught his eye. Monitor 6 covering the 14th floor hallway. The elevator doors were opening. The hallway was empty. The doors stayed open for a long time, nearly a minute. Then, the lights in the hallway flickered violently. For a single frame of video, a split second, Elias saw something standing in the elevator. A shadow, tall and impossibly thin. Then the doors closed. Elias rewound the tape. He played it back, frame by frame. Open, empty, empty, flicker. There. He paused the tape. The image was grainy, low resolution black and white. But the shape was undeniable. It looked like a man, but his head was tilted at a 90-degree angle, resting on his shoulder, and his arms hung down below his knees. Elias felt a cold sweat prickle his scalp. The intercom on his desk buzzed, making him jump. He stared at it. It was the line for the elevator emergency phone. No one should be in there. He slowly reached out and pressed the button. Security, he croaked. Static. Then a voice wet and gurgling. Floor, 44. The morning sun did little to dispel the gloom hanging over Blackwood Tower. Elias hadn't slept. The image on the monitor and the voice on the intercom had looped in his mind like a corrupted tape. He stayed past his shift, waiting for the building manager, Mr. Henderson, to arrive. Henderson was a sweating, nervous man who cared more about liability lawsuits than tenant safety. When Elias showed him the logbook entries from Marcus, Henderson waved a dismissive hand. Marcus was senile, Elias. That's why we let him go. He was drinking on the job. Seeing pink elephants and phantom floors. Just fix the damn display on Car 4. But Elias couldn't let it go. He needed concrete evidence. He decided to speak to Mrs. Higgins, the elderly woman who had reported the noise. Her apartment on the 4th floor was a museum of porcelain dolls and doilies, smelling of lavender and old paper. She served him tea with a trembling hand. "It wasn't just a noise, Mr. Thorne," she whispered, leaning in conspiratorially. "It was a melody, humming, like a mother soothing a child. It came from the wall behind my vanity, right where the shaft is." She paused, her eyes wide. "And the smell. Last night the elevator opened on my floor, but no one got out. I looked into the hallway. The elevator was overgrown." "Overgrown?" Elias asked, frowning. "Roots," she said. "Black roots, pulsing like veins, covering the floor and the walls of the cabin. And in the center, a pair of shoes. Little red shoes. A child's shoes." Elias felt a phantom punch to his gut. His own daughter, Lily, had been wearing red sneakers the day she died in the car accident 3 years ago. It was a coincidence, he told himself. Just a cruel coincidence. "I'll check the shaft, Mrs. Higgins. Probably just mold." He left her apartment, his heart pounding. He went to the basement workshop, a caged-in area filled with tools and spare parts. He needed to see the mechanical room at the top of the shaft, the penthouse level. It was accessed by a locked stairwell on the 38th floor. The climb was grueling. When he reached the machine room, the noise was deafening. The massive motors for the elevators were churning, the cables winding and unwinding on giant drums. Car 4's motor was hotter than the others, radiating waves of heat that blurred the air. Elias inspected the drum. The steel cable looked wrong. It was darker, the strands appearing fused together. He grabbed a caliper to measure the thickness. As he touched the cable, a shock ran up his arm, not electrical but a psychic jolt of pure terror. He gasped, dropping the tool. For a second, he wasn't in the machine room. He was standing in a field of gray ash, under a sky the color of a bruise. He saw the Blackwood Tower in the distance, but it was ruined, twisting up into the clouds like a spire of bone. Then, he was back in the machine room, gasping for air, clutching his numbness arm. He scrambled back, his breath coming in ragged gasps. On the floor where the caliper had fallen, there was a symbol scratched into the concrete dust. A spiral. He recognized it from the blueprints he had glanced at in the manager's office. Silus Blackwood's signature. But this scratch was fresh. Elias returned to the lobby, determined to shut down Car 4 completely. He placed out-of-order signs on every floor. As he was taping the sign to the first-floor doors, a tenant approached him. It was a young man, a college student named Greg. "Hey man, about time," Greg said, looking pale. "That thing is messed up." "I know," Elias said. "We're fixing it." "Fixing the time?" Greg asked. Elias paused. "What?" "The time, man. I got in that elevator yesterday on the 30th floor to go down to the lobby. It takes, what, a minute?" I checked my watch when I got in. It was 4 p.m. When the doors opened in the lobby, the clock behind the desk said 9 p.m. I lost 5 hours. 5 hours in a 1-minute ride. And I don't remember any of it. Greg rubbed his neck, looking terrified. "Except, I feel like I was running. My legs are sore like I ran a marathon." The discovery was solidifying. It wasn't just mechanics. It was physics, time dilation, spatial distortion. Elias went back to the security office and pulled the schematics of the building. He laid them out, overlaying the translucent sheets. He traced the shaft of Car 4. If the elevator went past the basement, where would it go? The blueprints showed solid foundation, but if he looked closely at the original ink drawings from 1974, he saw faint pencil lines, erased but still visible, extending downward. Not just one level, but deep, deep into the earth. And labeled in tiny, frantic script next to these impossible depths were names. Not functional names like Boiler Room, but names like the Atrium of Silence, the Gallery of Regret, and the Maw. That night, the first physical manifestation occurred. A delivery driver entered the lobby looking for a tenant on the 15th floor. He ignored the out-of-order sign on Car 4, which had mysteriously fallen off. The doors opened for him. Elias, watching from the booth, shouted, "Hey, don't get in there!" But the driver was wearing headphones. He stepped in. The doors slid shut. Elias sprinted across the lobby, slamming his fist on the button. The display flickered. 1, 2, 3. Then it skipped. It showed a symbol, an inverted cross. Then another symbol, a skull. Then the numbers began to race, blurring into a streak of red light. A scream tore through the heavy steel doors, a scream that sounded like it was coming from miles away, Doppler shifting as if the source was falling at terminal velocity. Then, silence. Elias pried the doors open with his emergency key. The shaft was empty. No car. He looked up. Nothing. He looked down. Darkness. But floating up from the abyss came a single object, caught in the updraft. It drifted into the lobby and landed at Elias's feet. It was the driver's pizza bag. It was aged, the fabric rotted and gray, as if it had been sitting in a tomb for 100 years. Inside, the pizza was dust. The disappearance of the delivery driver, a man named Leo, couldn't be swept under the rug. The police arrived within the hour. Detective Miller, a weary veteran with nicotine-stained fingers, looked at the empty shaft and then at Elias. So he stepped in, and the car wasn't there? Miller asked, scribbling in his notebook. The car was there, Elias insisted. I saw him step into the cab. The doors closed. Then the display went crazy, and he was gone. Miller raised an eyebrow. Gone where, Mr. Thorne? Up? Down? I don't know, Elias admitted. The bag. Look at the bag. He pointed to the rotted thermal bag on the floor. Miller poked it with his pen. It crumbled. Weird. Maybe chemical exposure in the shaft? We'll need to check the basement. The investigation was a farce. The police checked the B1 and B2 levels. They found the elevator car sitting innocently at the bottom of the shaft on the buffer springs. It was empty. No sign of Leo, no blood, no struggle. Just the lingering smell of ozone and wet earth. Miller concluded that Leo must have exited the elevator on another floor and fled, perhaps stealing the money, food, and the rotted bag was just old trash Elias had found. They filed a missing persons report and left. But Elias knew. The car at the bottom was a decoy, or perhaps the car had returned from wherever it went, cleansed of its passenger. Elias decided to call the only person who might understand, Marcus. He found the old man's number in the personnel files. It rang for a long time before a gruff voice answered. Who is this? Marcus? It's Elias Thorne. I took over your shift at Blackwood. Silence. Heavy breathing. Don't go in the shaft, kid, Marcus whispered. It's too late for that. A man is missing. Marcus, what is the 44th floor? I saw it on the display. There is no 44th floor, Marcus snapped. It's a trap. The architect, Blackwood, he didn't build a building. He built an antenna, a receiver. Receiving what? Something from the outside. Listen to me. The elevator creates a bridge. When the conditions are right, 3 a.m., rain, fear, it connects. You need to cut the cables. Sever the connection. Burn the motor. Marcus, that's insanity. I can't just burn down the... They took my eyes, Elias, Marcus screamed, his voice breaking. I didn't lose my sight to cataracts. I saw the architect on the 13th floor, and he took them. Don't look at the light, don't... The line went dead. Elias stared at the phone. Fear was turning into cold resolve. He couldn't burn the motor, but he could disable the car permanently. He grabbed a heavy angle grinder and a crowbar. He was going back to the penthouse machine room. As he moved through the hallways, he noticed the tenants were hiding. Doors were bolted. The building felt pressurized, the air thick and gelatinous. He passed a mirror in the hallway and stopped. His reflection was lagging. He moved his hand, and the reflection moved a second later. The reality of the building was fracturing. He reached the machine room. He plugged in the grinder. He approached the thick steel suspension cables of Car 4. Sparks flew as he touched the metal. He was going to cut them all, drop the car to the springs, and end this. Suddenly, the motor roared to life on its own. The drum spun violently, winding the cable at impossible speed. The grinder was ripped from Elias's hands, smashing against the wall. The cable whipped around, lashing out like a snake. Elias dove to the floor. The elevator was ascending. Fast. Too fast. The floor indicator on the control box in the room raced. 10, 20, 30, 38, 39, 40, 41. The room began to shake. The concrete walls cracked. A low, resonant chanting filled the air, coming from the motor itself. It sounded like Latin, but backward, spoken by 1,000 throats. Elias crawled toward the emergency brake lever. He grabbed it and pulled with all his might. The metal handle snapped off in his hand. The display hit 44. The motor stopped instantly. Silence. Then, a sound that froze Elias's blood. The sound of elevator doors opening. Not in the hallway below, but here in the machine room. But there were no elevator doors in the machine room. Elias turned slowly. On the solid concrete wall behind the motor, a seam had appeared. A light leaked through, a blinding violet light. The concrete groaned and slid open like steel doors. Beyond the wall was not the outside world, not the roof. It was a hallway. A hallway with plush red carpet, gold sconces, and wallpaper that patterned in shifting faces. A woman stood in the opening. She was beautiful, dressed in 1920s flapper attire, holding a cigarette holder. But her eyes were sewn shut with gold thread. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice smooth like velvet. "The architect has been waiting for you. You're late for the gala." "You're not real," Elias whispered, backing away. "We are the only thing that is real," she smiled, revealing teeth made of obsidian. "The world you come from is just a shadow cast by our grandeur. Come. Bring your daughter. She is here, you know. She misses her red shoes." The mention of his daughter broke him. Terror mixed with a desperate, agonizing hope. But Elias was a survivor. He grabbed a heavy wrench and threw it at the woman. The wrench passed through her like smoke and vanished into the violet light. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The doors began to close. "We will come for you, Elias. The elevator goes both ways." The concrete sealed shut. Elias was alone in the machine room, the smell of ozone and expensive perfume lingering in the air. He ran. He ran down the 38 flights of stairs, his legs burning, not stopping until he burst into the lobby. The lobby was in chaos. It was 2 a.m., but the lights were blazing. Tenants were gathered in the center, shouting, clutching suitcases. Water was leaking from the ceiling, black, oily water. Mr. Henderson was trying to calm them, but he looked on the verge of a stroke. "The walls are bleeding," a man shouted. "My kitchen walls are bleeding." "My dog ran into the hallway and vanished," cried a woman. Elias pushed through the crowd. "Everyone needs to leave. Now, get out of the building." "We can't," someone screamed. "The doors won't open." Elias ran to the main entrance. The glass doors were locked. He pushed the crash bar. It didn't budge. He kicked the glass. It didn't shatter. It felt solid, like clear steel. He looked outside. The street was there, the streetlights, the rain, but it looked flat. Like a painting. A car drove by, but it moved in a loop, repeating the same motion every 3 seconds. "We're sealed in," Elias realized with horror. The building has isolated itself. He turned back to the crowd. He had to lead them. "Listen to me. We need to gather in the community room on the ground floor. Stay away from the elevators. Stay away from the shafts." As he herded the terrified residents, Greg, the student, grabbed his arm. "Elias, look at the elevator display. All 4 elevators in the main bank were active now. They were synchronized. Car 1, D, Car 2, E, Car 3, A, Car 4, D, cute," Elias muttered. "Poltergeist theatrics." "No," Greg said, trembling. "Look at the floor numbers. They aren't numbers anymore, they're coordinates." The display shifted. 41.8 degree in N, 87.6 degree in W. The coordinates of Chicago. Then they changed. Degree X, degree Y. "It's moving the building," Greg theorized wildly. "The whole building is an elevator. We're moving through dimensions." Suddenly the lights died. Total blackness. The emergency lights kicked on, dim, red, bathing the lobby in a hellish glow. A scream erupted from the back of the crowd. "He's here! The Bellhop!" Elias shone his flashlight. Standing by the elevators was the figure Sarah had seen in the hook, the Bellhop. 7 feet tall, gray skin, uniform fused to his flesh. He was holding a luggage cart. On the cart were human heads: Leo, the delivery driver, Mrs. Higgins, and Marcus. The crowd panicked, stampeding toward the community room. Elias drew his baton, a useless gesture against a nightmare. The Bellhop looked at Elias and raised a finger to its lips. "Shh." Then, the Bellhop pointed to the ceiling. Above them, the plaster cracked. The building groaned. Gravity shifted. Everyone stumbled as the floor tilted 30 degrees. They weren't just moving. The building was rotating. Elias realized the twist wasn't just plot. It was literal. The geography of the Blackwood Tower was rearranging itself. The stairs might not lead down anymore. "Greg," Elias shouted. "The blueprints, the hidden room in the basement, the Atrium of Silence. We need to go down." "Down? Are you crazy?" "The control mechanism isn't in the penthouse," Elias yelled over the roar of shifting concrete. "I was wrong. The motor pulls it up, but the anchor is at the bottom. We have to destroy the anchor." "How do we get there if the stairs are gone?" Elias looked at the open shaft of car 4, where the Bellhop had vanished. The car was gone. The cables were humming. "We have to jump," Elias said. "On top of the car. We have to ride it down to hell." It was madness, but the lobby walls were closing in literally. The room was shrinking. Elias grabbed a coil of fire hose from the wall cabinet. He tied it around his waist and secured it to a pillar. "I'm going down. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, it won't matter." He jumped into the open shaft of car 4, sliding down the greasy cable until he hit the roof of the elevator car, which was hovering just below the lobby. As he landed, the car began to descend. Smoothly, rapidly. He wasn't controlling it. It was taking him. The walls of the shaft fell away. He wasn't in a shaft anymore. He was descending through a colossal cavern, a subterranean cathedral carved from black rock, thousands of feet wide, and lining the walls of this cavern were doors, hundreds of elevator doors hovering in the void. This was the hub, the central station for the floors that don't exist. The descent felt eternal. The air in the cavern was stagnant and cold, smelling of ancient dust and copper. Elias clung to the crossbeam on top of the elevator car, his flashlight beam lost in the immensity of the space. Below him, the darkness was absolute, a void that seemed to swallow the light. As the car plummeted, Elias saw the doors passing by. They weren't just doors, they were windows into other places. One set of doors was open. Inside, he saw a hospital corridor from the 1950s, nurses walking backward, flames licking the ceiling. Another door passed, a Victorian nursery where toys floated in zero gravity, spinning slowly. Another, a forest of dead trees under a red sun, where things with antlers stalked through the mist. Elias squeezed his eyes shut. "It's not real, it's not real." "It is all real, Elias." The voice came from inside the car beneath him. It was his daughter's voice, small, scared. "Daddy, I'm cold." "Lily?" Elias sobbed, pressing his ear to the metal roof. "Lily, are you in there?" "The bad man put me in the box, Daddy, the architect. He says I'm a battery. He says my fear makes the building tall." Elias roared in rage, hammering his fists against the escape hatch on the roof. It was welded shut. He grabbed his crowbar and jammed it into the seam, heaving with all his strength. Metal screamed. The hatch popped open. He dropped into the car. It was empty. No Lily, just the flickering red light and the smell of ozone. "Lily!" he screamed. The display panel lit up. Floor 9, the boiler room. The car slowed. The sensation of weight returned. The doors opened. Elias stepped out, weapon raised. He expected fire and brimstone. Instead, he found an office. It was an exact replica of the Blackwood Tower's management office, but infinitely larger. Rows and rows of filing cabinets stretched into the darkness. The floor was water, black, still water, ankle deep. Sitting at a massive mahogany desk in the center of this watery expanse was a man. He wore a suit from the 1920s, perfectly tailored. He was writing in a ledger with a quill pen. He didn't look up. "Silus Blackwood," Elias said, his voice shaking. The man stopped writing. He looked up. His face was unblemished, youthful, but his eyes were ancient, black pools with no whites. "Mr. Thorne, you have a heavy tread. You're disturbing the tenants." "Where is my daughter?" Elias demanded, wading toward the desk. "She is part of the foundation now, like all the others. A building this size requires spiritual reinforcement. Mortar is weak. Souls are strong." Blackwood stood up, walking on the surface of the water without sinking. "You're a monster. I am a visionary. I found the cracks in the world, Elias. I built a bridge. This tower is a needle stitching the dimensions together. Do you know what lies on floor 44? Truth. The end of entropy. Eternal life." "It's a slaughterhouse," Elias spat. "Progress always looks like slaughter to the cattle." Blackwood smiled. "You want your daughter? She is on the 44th floor, the penthouse, the apex. But you are here, in the roots. You have a long way to climb." Blackwood snapped his fingers. The water erupted. Hands, thousands of pale, rotting hands, shot up from the dark liquid, grasping at Elias's legs. "Go on, Elias. Take the elevator, if you can survive the ascent." Blackwood dissolved into a swarm of moths. The hands pulled Elias down. He kicked and thrashed, his baton striking bone and rot. He broke free, scrambling back toward the elevator. The hands clawed at his uniform, tearing flesh. He dove into the car and smashed the button for the top floor. The doors slammed shut, severing a grasping hand that flopped onto the floor of the cab. The elevator lurched upward. The G-force was crushing. Elias was pinned to the floor, nose bleeding. The display raced. 9, 8, 0, 10, 20, 30, 38. It didn't stop. 39, 40, 41, 42, 43. The walls of the elevator began to glow white-hot. The wood veneer burned away, revealing translucent crystal walls. Outside, he saw the cosmos, but the stars were wrong. They were eyes. 44. The car stopped. The doors to the 44th floor didn't slide. They dissolved into mist. Elias stumbled out, his body battered, his mind fraying. He expected a hellscape. He found a garden. It was a rooftop garden, beautiful and serene, under a sky of swirling nebulas. But the plants were made of glass and wire, and the flowers were human eyes blinking in the breeze. In the center of the garden stood a structure, a gazebo made of bone. And sitting in the gazebo, playing with a doll, was a girl. "Lily?" She turned. It was her. She looked exactly as she did the day she died, 7 years old. Red sneakers. "Daddy," she beamed, dropping the doll. She ran to him. Elias fell to his knees, opening his arms. She collided with him, warm and solid. He buried his face in her hair, smelling strawberries and rain. He sobbed, the relief shattering him. "I found you. I found you. I missed you, Daddy," she whispered. "But you have to stay now. You can't leave. We're both leaving, baby. We're going home." She pulled back, her face serious. "No, home is gone. The architect says this is better. No cars, no accidents. We can play forever." Elias froze. "Lily, we have to go." "Look at the view, Daddy." She pointed to the edge of the roof. Elias walked to the edge. He looked down. He didn't see Chicago, he saw the abyss, a swirling vortex of souls, screaming silently. And feeding into this vortex were the elevator shafts of Blackwood Tower, acting like syringes, injecting pain and fear into the maw. He feeds it, Elias realized. He feeds the entity to keep this paradise alive. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Lily said. Her voice had changed. It was deeper, older. Elias turned to look at her. Her face was shifting. Her eyes were widening, turning black. Her skin was graying. Lily? Daddy, don't you want to be part of the building? The thing that looked like Lily began to grow. Its jaw unhinged, limbs lengthened. It wasn't Lily. It was a mimic, a lure. The architect's laughter echoed from the sky. Did you really think the dead come back, Mr. Thorne? The heartbreak was worse than the fear. Elias staggered back. You're not her. I am her memory. I am your guilt. The creature lunged, screeching. Elias raised his crowbar, tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. He swung. The impact was wet and sickening. The creature dissolved into black sludge. Elias stood alone in the garden of bone. The illusion flickered. The garden revealed its true form, a rusted metal platform suspended over nothingness. The stars were the eyes of the architect, watching from the dark. He saw the core of the machine, a pulsating heart of machinery and flesh, suspended in the center of the platform. Cables ran from it down into the darkness. This was the anchor, the thing Blackwood had merged with. If he destroyed it, the tower's connection to this place would sever. But the backlash would likely kill him. Elias looked at the lily sludge on his boots. He looked at the heart. For the tenants, he whispered. For the real Lily. He raised the crowbar again, aiming for the pulsing crystal in the center of the heart. Elias sprinted toward the pulsating heart. The ground beneath him, a mesh of rusted grates, shook violently. The architect sensed the threat. The glass plants shattered, transforming into jagged shards that flew at Elias like shrapnel. He shielded his face with his arm, feeling the glass slice through his uniform and skin. But he didn't stop. You cannot undo the work of decades, Blackwood's voice boomed, vibrating the very atoms of the air. The giant eyes in the sky narrowed. From the shadows of the platform, the bellhop emerged again, moving with unnatural speed. It tackled Elias, slamming him onto the grate. The crowbar skid away toward the edge, the bellhop's cold, gray hands wrapped around Elias's throat. Floor, 0. It gurgled. Elias gagged, kicking at the creature's shins. It was like kicking stone. His vision began to spot. He was going to die here, miles above reality, strangled by a ghost. His hand scrambled on the grate, searching for a weapon. His fingers brushed against something metal. His key ring. He grabbed the keys, a heavy cluster of brass and steel. He jammed the keys into the bellhop's eye socket. The creature shrieked, a sound of tearing metal. It recoiled, clutching its face. The grip loosened. Elias gasped, rolled over, and scrambled for the crowbar. He grabbed it just as it teetered on the edge. He stood up. The heart was pulsing faster, a frenetic beat that sounded like a drum. Thump, 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 thump. No! Blackwood screamed. A wind howled, trying to blow Elias off the platform. Elias reached the heart. It was hot, burning his skin as he got close. He saw faces swirling inside the crystal core. All the missing people. Leo, Marcus, the countless others. They were screaming silently. I release you, Elias roared. He swung the crowbar with every ounce of strength he had left. The steel tip struck the crystal. Crack. A fissure appeared. A beam of pure white light shot out, blinding Elias. He swung again. Crack. Stop. You'll destroy us all, Blackwood pleaded now. I can give you her back. I can make a new Lily. She's dead, Elias screamed. And so are you. He swung a third time. The crowbar embedded itself deep into the core. The crystal shattered. The explosion was silent at first, a shock wave of psychic energy that knocked Elias flat. Then came the sound of 1,000 chains breaking at once. The sky tore open. The giant eyes burned away. The garden of bone crumbled to dust. The platform began to fall. Elias grabbed a trailing cable, wrapping it around his arm. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of memories and nightmares. He was falling through the floors, 44, 43, 42, through the hospital, the nursery, the forest. They were all disintegrating, sucked into the void where the heart used to be. The elevator shaft of Blackwood Tower appeared around him, rapidly materializing. He was back in the physical world, but falling down the shaft. He saw the roof of Car 4 below him, rushing up to meet him. He braced for impact. The cable jerked taut. His shoulder dislocated with a sickening pop. He swung, smashing into the concrete wall of the shaft. Car 4 slammed into the buffers at the bottom of the pit with a thunderous crash. Elias dangled above it, slipping. He couldn't hold on. He let go. He fell 10 feet, landing hard on the roof of the car. Darkness took him. Elias woke up to the sound of sirens, real sirens, Chicago sirens. He was lying on a stretcher, being wheeled out of the Blackwood Tower lobby. The air was cold and smelled of rain and exhaust fumes, the sweetest smell he had ever known. "He's alive," a paramedic shouted. "Severe trauma, possible fracture, get the IV started." Elias tried to sit up. The tenants? "Easy, buddy," the paramedic said. "They're safe. Fire department cut the doors open. Everyone got out. We found you at the bottom of the shaft. You took a hell of a fall." Elias looked back at the building. It looked normal. Just a dirty, ugly high-rise. But there was a large crack running up the side of the concrete facade, from the foundation to the roof like a lightning scar. Detective Miller was there, looking pale. He walked alongside the stretcher. "Thorne," he said. "We found something in the basement behind a false wall. A room full of remains, old remains, decades old. Looks like Blackwood was running a slaughterhouse down there." "Not a slaughterhouse," Elias wheezed. "A battery." Miller frowned. "Whatever it was, it's over. The place is being condemned. Structural instability." 6 months later. Elias walked with a cane. His shoulder still clicked when it rained. He lived in a small bungalow in the suburbs, far away from high-rises. Blackwood Tower was scheduled for demolition. The city had tried to implode it twice, but the charges failed to detonate both times. Now, they were taking it apart piece by piece, wrecking ball and crane. Elias sat on his porch, watching the news. A reporter stood in front of the skeletal remains of the tower. "Crews report strange phenomena during the demolition," the reporter said. "Tools vanishing, strange noises, and reports of a phantom floor that appears on the construction elevator's control panel." Elias turned off the TV. He looked down at his shoes. He had bought a new pair. Red sneakers. He kept them by the door, not for wearing, but for remembering. He knew it wasn't truly over. You can break the machine, but you can't close the hole it made. The architect was gone, dissipating into the void, but the void remained. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a souvenir he had found in his uniform pocket at the hospital. A jagged piece of crystal. It was warm to the touch. Sometimes late at night when the house was quiet, he could hear a faint humming coming from the crystal, and if he held it to his ear, he could hear the sound of an elevator chime. Ding. He stood up and walked to the kitchen to throw the crystal in the trash. He hesitated. The hum was soothing. It sounded like a lullaby. He put the crystal back in his pocket. "Going up," he whispered to the empty room. Outside, the wind howled, sounding suspiciously like a bellhop asking for your bags.